So having said this, I'd like to move on to item 9, draft overall research framework for the convention. Let me remind you that this item originates from the evaluation of the standard setting work of UNESCO's culture sector conducted by the UNESCO's Internal Oversight Service, IOS, in 2013. According to IOS, it is difficult to understand the progress made with regard to the implementation of the convention if objectives, indicators, and benchmarks are not clearly defined. The committee at its 8th session therefore decided to develop an overall research framework for the convention. From the beginning, the committee emphasized the necessity for an inclusive process of consultation and discussion in the development of such a framework, and asked for an open-ended working group to discuss it. Last year, the committee was able to acknowledge the outcomes of a preliminary meeting of experts generously hosted in Beijing by the National Commission of the People's Republic of China for UNESCO, and took note of the research map that the experts had produced. At the current session, the committee will make another step forward in the development of the framework as we will discover the research of the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group that was organized in June this year in Chengdu, thanks to the generous contribution by the Ministry of Culture of People's Republic of China and the Center for Safeguarding Intangible Cultural Heritage in Chengdu. This meeting represented a fundamental step in the process of consultation and dialogue between state parties to achieve the ultimate goal of adopting the framework. We are graced with the presence of His Excellency Ambassador Xuexian Wang, chairperson of the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group. As you may recall from the onset of the 2003 convention, Ambassador Wang played a key role in its development as chairperson of the first extraordinary session of the Intergovernmental Committee in Chengdu, China in May 2007, and again as a key actor in 2013. Again in Chengdu during the International Conference on Intangible Cultural Heritage in celebration of the 10th anniversary of 2003 Convention. I am honored to give him the floor so that he can illustrate the main achievements of the working group. Excellency Ambassador Wang, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ambassador Lee. Excellencies, dear participants. At the very outset, I wish to thank the Chair for inviting me to this session of the Intergovernmental Committee meeting to present a brief report on the result of the working group held in Chengdu. I'm sure that this session of the committee's meeting, under the able chairship of yourself, the results would be as beautiful as that of Jeju Island. But with your permission, Excellency, I wish to say a few words at the beginning, which are not included in my report. You mentioned the Chengdu meeting 10 years ago. I dare to boast that at that time, I look a bit younger and also a bit better looking than I was today. But unfortunately, these 10 years have left mercilessly their mark on my face and took most of the hair from my head. By this, I meant to say that time waits for nobody. No organization. We should seize the day and the hour to do whatever we can to ensure a better safeguarding of ICH, which to me is an integral part of the life and an integral part of the soul of mankind. With that, now I return back to the report. 53 member states, 3 Category 2 centers, and 8 accredited NGO organizations were present in Chengdu for the working group meeting. These figures themselves show that all stakeholders concerning ICH are dedicated to work out a framework. Although the task assigned to us by your committee was not an easy one and required a lot of joint efforts and also concentration due to the complexity of the results framework. But I found that the atmosphere in Chengdu, in our working group, was very positive, harmonious, and the participants intervened always in a very constructive way. So the initiative to work out a framework was welcomed with enthusiasm. And the final consensus, I have to say, was reached quite easily, which we have not expected from the very beginning. And thanks to the joint efforts of every participant, especially those from the state parties. The working group's discussion was built, or the chair mentioned, upon the results map that had been proposed by the 2016 expert group, and which was welcomed by the committee last year. In Chengdu, our working group examined the draft set of core indicators one by one, and also the associated assessment factors prepared by the Secretariat, with an aim to permit effective measurement of the outputs, outcomes, and the impacts already identified in the results map. In most of the cases, working group members were able to agree on the wording of specific indicators or factors. In some other cases, they called for further revision or rewording of the components. A group of 6 rapporteurs were elected, 1 for each UNESCO electoral group. And they were elected to support the editing of the draft framework and also to review the debates. I have to say, they have been working very, very hard. And every night, they have to work late into the night together with the Secretariat. And I admire their dedication. And I recognize some of the faces present today. So the rapporteurs are, first you must excuse for my pronunciation of your beautiful names. Anything wrong is my responsibility. They are Ms. Gabriel Detman, Austria. Ms. Alla Stashkevich, Belarus. Mr. Andres Ferrero, Colombia. Ms. Song Mi Bak, Republic of Korea. Ms. Abdul Aziz Gise, Senegal. and Ms. Hani Hayane, Jordan. As I said, they have really worked very hard. I'm very grateful for their outstanding contribution to the final result of the report, of the text. And the text was well prepared, and that was adopted by the working group unanimously during the final session, and which were in front of you today. At this stage, I will only underline that the number of core indicators remained at 26. There's no change on the number of indicators, although the order may have changed somewhat, but not the content. And the number of assessment factors increased slightly to 86. That's quite a big number, but to 86. I'm sure that Ms. Curtis will shortly provide you with more information on the details on the framework and also the task in front of you today. I'm also pleased to highlight that the overall results framework was adopted, as I said, unanimously and enthusiastically by the working group and recommended to the committee on your committee for adoption. I assume you can adopt it in 5 minutes. The working group meeting was also an important occasion for the participants to discuss the possible impacts and linkages with the periodic reporting mechanism under the 203 Convention. There was a consensus that benefits could be obtained or attained through moving to a regional cycle for national reporting. That could provide opportunities for international cooperation, knowledge sharing, and technical assistance, including capacity building. The working group also deliberated on the potential of mobilizing complementary sources of information and how they might be used for assessing the impact of the Convention. In this regard, it was suggested to continue exploring the possibility of using other sources of information for assessing the impact of the Convention beyond periodic reports, and the potential synergies with the reporting mechanisms outside the 203 Convention. In particular, the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030. Mr. Chair, I personally think that the establishment of the overall results framework is an ambitious and visionary undertaking that is rare in international normative instruments. I hope that our work in Chengdu would provide a solid basis for your decision today, which is crucial for guaranteeing a successful future of our cherished convention. But finally, I wish to pay my gratitude to Mr. Curtis and his team for their professionalism, their dedication, and outstanding contribution to the work of my group. And I also wish to thank my government and the UNESCO for their trust in me and for their daring to take the risk to nominate me as chair of the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Wang, for your inspiring presentation. I am sure that the information that you provided will guide us today in our debate on the overall discussion. Before starting our discussion, I'd like to ask the Secretary to present the document we have in front of us, and in particular, to provide the committee with some details about the draft framework presented in Annex 2, together with the way forward. Mr. Curtis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and please allow me before starting to also thank Ambassador Wang for his hard work and his skilled chairing of a technically complex meeting which we held in Chengdu. I think I'm pronouncing better. Indeed, what we are trying to do is new, innovative, and rather ambitious. Specific challenges arise from developing an overall results framework for an international normative instrument such as our convention, which is quite atypical of the kind of programs on which monitoring and evaluation work typically focuses. The convention involves many actors, many potential causes, and just as many possible effects. But the overall vision is already determined by its basic texts. So these have always kept in mind when including such a framework. The graphic presentation of the framework that you will find in Annex 2 of document ITH/17/12.com/9 was inspired from the framework which was adopted in the 2005 convention for its 2015 global report. So the visual framework is based on that. And if you please look at Table 1 in Annex 2 of the working document, the top 4 rows are the impacts and outcomes proposed by the expert group in Beijing, and which were welcomed by the committee at its 11th session last year in Addis Ababa. We've reformatted the information here with impacts at the top rather than the bottom, followed by long-term, mid-term, and short-term outcomes. The next row identifies 8 thematic areas that seek to group the core indicators in a logical way. Assignment of an indicator to a particular area is not intended to imply that it refers exclusively to that single thematic area. Certain indicators may well have a foot in 2 different areas, and other configurations might have been possible. But it is a way of ordering the thinking and the indicators that came below. Finally, Table 1 offers abbreviated statements of the 26 core indicators, and it should be noted that the authoritative statements of the core indicators are to be found in Table 2. So if we study a little Table 2, where each indicator is accompanied by 2 to 5 assessment factors against which the indicator is to be assessed. I remind you that indicators are defined as a qualitative or quantitative means of measuring an output or outcome with the intention of gauging the performance of a program or investment. For indicators to function most effectively, they must be measurable, and all actors involved in monitoring, reporting, and evaluation should share a consensus about what to measure and how to measure it. The core indicators are generally formulated in terms of extent to which a given situation exists or some change has been achieved. It is not accidental that they do not say extent to which states parties have done X or implemented Y, since there are often a larger number of actors contributing to the results. Therefore, it is essential that the assessment factors include both those initiatives that arise within the communities or groups themselves and those interventions that come from outside of the communities or groups, including those that originate with the state. For each core indicator, the draft framework presents 2 or more assessment factors against which that indicator is to be assessed. Each state monitors and reports on the existence or absence of these factors within its territory. In most cases, these factors and their terminology are drawn directly from the various provisions of the Convention and its operational directives, in which state parties are obliged or encouraged to ensure that specific conditions are met, either through their own actions or by facilitating the actions of others. Core indicators and assessment factors are closely focused on the kind of information that states parties will regularly provide in their periodic reports. The principal source of information for the overall results framework will therefore be the periodic reports that will provide sufficient information to determine whether each of the core indicators is achieved. And that is with the exceptions of indicators 23 and 26, which are to be monitored at the global level, drawing upon information already being gathered by the Secretariat. So again, the idea is not to create, and we heard very well last year, parallel reporting systems or extra reporting systems, but to align the periodic reporting with the overall results framework so that through the periodic reporting we are able to understand the impact of the Convention. And of course, not every indicator will necessarily have the same relevance for each country. States will indeed report and monitor on the existence or absence of the correspondent assessment factors within their territory. Because each indicator has two or more associated factors against which it will be assessed, it will be possible to report that within a given state party, an indicator is fully or partially satisfied. The results framework will not, as I've just said, impose new reporting obligations. And synergies with other reporting mechanisms, such as those for the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030, will be considered also for assessing the impact of the Convention. For the way forward, the Secretariat will therefore elaborate guidance notes for all the 26 course indicators similar to the sample guidance notes included in Annex 3. And these should be a useful tool for the overall results framework to be implemented effectively. Thanks to them, all those involved in monitoring, reporting and evaluation should share a consensus about the scope of each indicator and a common understanding of how to measure the degree to which it has been attained. Additional work remains to define baselines and targets for each core indicator, both at the global level and the country level. The working group agreed with the Secretariat's suggestion that it will be prudent to approach the problem of baselines and targets at a later stage once states parties have reached general agreement on the draft framework. For the time being, it suffices to clarify that both targets and baselines need to be realistic to be effective. They must be based on actual experience, and in the case of targets, they must be attainable. Targets should not be so easy that they will always be met, but neither should they be so ambitious that achievements will always fall short. Country-level baselines and targets will be established by each state party according to its own situation, capacities and priorities. The global ones would be established through an international consultative process. The adoption of the overall results framework will have an impact also on the periodic reporting system. As I mentioned, possible improvements will be discussed in the next item on the agenda, item 10, in particular the shift to a regional cycle of national reporting. Without going into any details now, I would like to mention that a revised results-oriented ICH 10 periodic reporting form is envisaged, as well as informational materials and capacity-building activities for rolling out the results framework and the new reporting system. Let me recall once again that periodic reporting should not only be about compliance with reporting obligations. It has to be meaningful and useful for states themselves and should be considered as a unique opportunity for states to take stock of the achievements and challenges that still remain for an effective implementation of the Convention. If the committee wishes to examine the results framework in Annex 2, I would suggest to consider the two tables presented earlier in inverse order as the working group did. First, adopting the exact language of the core indicators in Table 1 before turning to the abbreviated statements in the exact language in Table 2 before turning to the abbreviated statements in Table 1. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for this thorough presentation. I am sure that committee members are eager to jump in on your presentation and that of Ambassador Wang. So without further ado, I open the floor. Does anybody wish to kick off? I recognize the distinguished representative of Senegal first. You have the floor, sir.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'ai eu le privilège de prendre part à ce groupe de travail et d'être parmi les rapporteurs de ce groupe de travail. À ce titre, vous me permettrez de rendre un hommage vibrant à son Excellence, M. Wang, par sa sagesse, mais aussi par son sens des relations humaines, par sa pédagogie. Il a su jouer un rôle extrêmement important en présidant ces travaux. Par moments, c'était difficile, mais il a su à chaque fois être là, à la place qu'il faut, pour ramener les débats dans un esprit parfaitement harmonieux. C'était agréable de travailler avec son Excellence et nous avons beaucoup appris et je pense vraiment qu'il faut lui rendre un hommage particulier. Si nous avons réussi à faire ce travail, c'est grâce vraiment à sa pédagogie et à sa sagesse. Merci, Excellence. Je voudrais dire ensuite que ce travail qui a été produit, c'est un travail long, inclusif, participatif, où vraiment les experts des différents horizons, les ONG, tout le monde a pu participer à l'élaboration, à la reformulation, si vous voulez, de tout ce que nous avons hérité déjà du premier groupe de travail de 2016 et ce que nous avons fait en 2017. Je souhaite que le comité ici présent puisse apprécier ce travail et aller dans le sens de son adoption. Il y a des choses extrêmement importantes qui ont été décidées, qui ont été proposées, et notamment le cycle des rapports périodiques. Il y a beaucoup de choses. Même hier, on a parlé d'indicateurs. Vous savez, on a quand même eu beaucoup de problèmes dans la culture en ce qui concerne les indicateurs. Aujourd'hui, il ne s'agit pas peut-être de vendre la culture, de la commercialiser, comme disait hier l'ambassadeur de Cuba, mais nous avons quand même à proposer, dans le cadre de l'économie de la culture, dans le cadre de l'agenda 2030, il y a des facteurs à mettre en valeur dans la culture. Il y a peut-être ce que nous appelons en Afrique les aspects sacrés et les aspects profanes. Mais vous savez que la gastronomie, si je prends que cet exemple, est un élément essentiel de nos cultures. Mais la gastronomie, il faut peut-être la vendre. Et si nous voulons la vendre, et si nous voulons vendre quelques produits de la culture, il nous faut avoir des indicateurs probants. Et ça, nous avons travaillé à Beijing, grâce vraiment à l'UNESCO. Et nous terminons notre intervention en félicitant également le secrétariat. Vraiment un professionnalisme exceptionnel. Nous avons travaillé quelquefois jusqu'à des heures impossibles, mais c'est parce que également le secrétariat était là. Et à chaque fois que les gens voulaient arrêter, on est allé plus loin. Et vraiment, c'est un travail sur lequel moi, je suis sorti de Beijing complètement, voilà, ravi de ce que j'ai vécu là-bas et je pense que c'est des expériences absolument originales. Merci à tous.
Thank you, Senegal. On my list, Colombia, Philippines, Turkey, Austria. I now give the floor to Colombia.
The delegation of Colombia commends the Secretariat and the participants of the working group for the elaboration of an extensive and comprehensive set of indicators and assessment factors with which to measure the overall result of the implementation of the 2003 Convention for the Safeguarding of ICH. The delegation of Colombia would also like to extend its gratitude towards the People's Republic of China, whose generosity allowed to the development of this working group and thus generating a cooperative effort in the construction of this overall results framework. We would also like to thank especially Mr. Wang for his wisdom, and helping us to work on this subject. We would like to emphasize the importance of one of the recommendations of the working group, which is to work towards the exploration of synergies with other reporting mechanisms outside the Convention. We believe that we must strive towards positioning ICH as a fundamental factor in generating new ways of understanding human well-being and providing a guide towards the protection of a diverse, creative, and rich future at the global, national, and local levels. In other words, it is important to continue work within the framework of the Convention, but understanding that safeguarding ICH plays a larger role of communities and groups in the strengthening of their capacities of resiliency in the present context. Therefore, we would like to present a possible amendment in paragraph 7 of draft decision, adding the following in the current text. Further request the Secretariat to elaborate providing targets, explore broadly potential synergies with reporting mechanisms outside the Convention. In particular, the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030, specifically the Goal 11 in regards to sustainable cities and communities, especially Target 11.4 that calls for strengthening the efforts to safeguard and protect the world heritage and natural cultural heritage. This will give a place to ITH within another important framework of sustainable development, which happens related to urban issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. I now invite your distinguished representative of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We commend the Secretariat for the work on this initiative, which is based on an iOS recommendation, and of course, Ambassador Wang for his able leadership during the Chengdu meeting. Having an overall results framework is very useful to measure implementation of the Convention. In our view, the challenge should be in promoting the framework as a common point of reference for states, parties, and communities. Considering the complexity of the framework and the need for the Secretariat to prepare guidance notes, this shall also be an additional burden on top of the daily administrative workload of the Secretariat. Questions as to its implementation and measurement also arise. Will this framework be embedded in periodic reporting of states parties? Conceptually, would numerical indicators be able to fully capture the diversity of local and national situations, institutions, and capacities when it comes to ICH? There may be pitfalls in prescribing a common template when comparisons are intrinsically very difficult to achieve. Also, the level and nature of communities' involvement in such assessments, measuring the extent to which, quote unquote, certain policies or guidelines are being met, should be carefully considered before adopting the framework. Well, another concern is actually whether the overall results may result to some contractual obligations based on the Convention. Well, states parties may need more time to fully understand the implications of the framework. In this regard, we recommend that the Secretariat convene an information meeting for all states parties before the General Assembly. Not all state parties were present, just like my delegation, nor aware of the working group held in Chengdu. We have submitted an amendment to the draft decision in this regard, which is also co-sponsored by other delegations. And if I may read my draft, the draft that we would like to be part of the draft decision is request the Secretariat to convene an information meeting in the first quarter of 2018 on the overall results framework and its practical implications for states parties. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. Now, Turkey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We would like to thank the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group on developing an overall results framework and the support given by China to this end. And particularly, let me commend the chairperson of the open-ended group, Ambassador Wang, for his leadership in in conducting a very fruitful discussion. Our experts were there, but personally I was able to understand the richness of the debate going through the summary records of the meeting. So it felt that everything was explored there. We believe that we are at a critical stage where this committee will be considering this framework. As a matter of fact, this work of the Convention has already been acknowledged as a best practice by the ad hoc working group on governance. It will be replicated by other conventions if we are able to carry this process forward in a successful manner. Basically, application of overall results framework is an ambitious undertaking, as this would be a new approach for states parties, as well as different actors involved in the process, which are diverse in nature. Support and guidance would be needed for the implementation of this new approach. Support would be necessary in the establishment of targets and baselines at the country level. As a result of application of results-based framework, periodic reporting format is planned to be revised to align it with the overall results framework. At a time when the rate of reporting to Secretariat is quite low under its current format, it would be even more challenging for state parties to report in a new format. State parties would be in need of support for their adaptation to this new periodic reporting as well. We would like to know how Secretariat is planning to implement it, considering the financial limitations of the Convention. And we will have some remarks when we come to the adoption of the decisions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. And now Austria.
The delegation of Austria welcomes the new overall results framework, and we would like to join the previous speakers in thanking the host country, China, and for hosting the meeting and for co-funding the open-ended intergovernmental working group in Jeju. And we think it will help the monitoring of the implementation of the convention and focus on output, outcomes, and impact. The aim is to develop a clear and credible evidence-based vision for the future implementation of the convention. The elements for this common vision include the concept of safeguarding, the involvement of communities, mutual appreciation and respect, as well as international cooperation. Looking at the results, we think that this framework will serve as a roadmap to implement and realize the full potential of the Convention, since it provides to be a highly relevant guide to make the Convention more effective. With the results framework, periodic reporting could indeed become a learning opportunity for state parties on national as well as on regional levels. We would therefore like to draw our attention to the proposed improvements to the periodic reporting system as addressed under the next item, item 10 in our agenda, which will hopefully enhance the quality, the usefulness, and particularly also the number of periodic reports. We would like to thank the Secretariat for the helpful guidance notes and welcome the elaboration of similar notes for all 26 core indicators. The remaining challenge we see is the definition of baselines and targets for each core indicator, considering that ICH involves a broad range of stakeholders in the implementation of the Convention. With the new framework and the new periodicity of the reporting system as proposed by the Secretariat, however, we are confident that the committee will have a much better overview how the Convention is developing in future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Austria. So for the time being, we have completed a kind of general debate on this item. Any other interventions? Okay, before moving to the decision, I'd like to invite either Secretariat or Ambassador Wang if they have something to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to address two of the questions I believe were addressed to the Secretariat, one from the Philippines and one from Turkey. From the Philippines, indeed, I think the questions you pose are exactly the questions we discussed in Chengdu. And these are complex questions. And we had 53 countries discussing them quite in depth over 3 days. And the results framework is the result of all of those discussions. We are sorry you were not able to participate, but I can assure you we sent letters to every single delegation. It was in the committee decision, so it is unfortunate, but this is precisely why we needed a 3-day intergovernmental process in order to come to these kinds of agreements because of the complexity of those exact questions you answered. I might invite you to look at the summary records, as was said, because you will see that many of those points were debated. And of course, the framework will never be perfect. It is a consensus that was achieved in Chengdu. But we would be very happy to give an information session before the General Assembly. There is no problem for those who are not able to participate so that they can be informed on those decisions. I think Turkey's point is also a very good question, and that is why, and it was also addressed during the 3 days we were there, and that is why it led to the proposal also to reform the periodic reporting. And you will see in the next item that we intend to address to suspend for a period periodic reporting while we revise the forms and develop capacity building materials. And if we move to this regional cycle, we will need extra budgetary money to do that, but we will hope to do capacity buildings as it happens. So those concerns have been discussed and thought about in Chengdu. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My delegation also wishes to thank the People's Republic of China for its generous hosting and co-funding the Chengdu meeting. Unfortunately, our delegation was not able to attend, but we savored the richness of the debate from the summary record, and we also thank very warmly and commend the chairman for achieving this formidable result in such a short time. We feel the complexity of the issue, and we also share some of the concerns expressed. Nevertheless, we really like to express our appreciation for the ambition of conceptual coherence that is present in this overall results framework, and the way it is foreseen that it will roll out in practical measures in terms of periodic reporting and actually the needed capacity building that should accompany the periodic reporting if this framework is applied. We also see that this will result in a complex periodic reporting system, but that will be one that is also meaningful. And we think that the conceptual clarity and coherence makes the reporting exercise meaningful, and then it is worth the effort and worth the energy put into it. So in this spirit, we also support the proposal of the Philippines to convene the information meeting in the next in the first quarter of 2018, and we look forward to the implementation of this overall results framework that goes to the very core of this convention. The Article 2 of the convention that defines, Article 1 of the convention that defines the purposes of the convention picks up the very same terms that are echoed in the overall results framework, that is safeguarding mutual respect, raising awareness at the local, national, and international levels of the importance of intangible cultural heritage, international cooperation and assistance, and of course, communities that should be present in the safeguarding measures and should be active agents in decisions affecting their ICH. We think that the overall results framework reflects that attitude and reflects these core principles of the Convention. That's why, on the whole, we support it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Hungary. Any other comments or questions, interventions? I see none. Let's move now to the decision. Please refer to document ITH/17/12.com/9 and its draft decision in para 21. Can we see on screens? Yeah. May I ask the committee to adopt the draft decision 12.com/9 as shown on the screens, because there must be some proposed amendments. Let us proceed para by para. Para 1 is a procedural one. I see no objections. Para 2, recalling previous decisions. I see no objections. Adopted. Para 3, thanking China for having generously hosted and co-funded the open-ended Intergovernmental Working Group. Are there any comments? Adopted. Para 4, to welcome the outcomes of the working group and thanks its members. No objections. Adopted. Para 5, to recommend to the GA to approve the overall... It's
a new para 5.
New para 5? Mm-hmm.
It's a new paragraph amendment of the Philippines.
Yeah, it's a new para proposed by Philippines, Algeria, Hungary.
Can I say something on this paragraph? May I intervene on this paragraph?
All right. Yeah, I'd like to ask the Secretary to intervene.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned earlier, we're very happy to provide an information session. I have some concerns with the term the first quarter. Whether or not we'll be able to do it by the end of March, which is the first quarter of the year, I'm a little bit concerned in terms of logistics. As you know, we have a new Director General, we have many things going on, and we have an evaluation body. If we could be given a bit more flexibility in the timeline to ensure that we can do it before the General Assembly, say at least 4 weeks before the General Assembly. The first quarter may be difficult. So I would ask for the indulgence of the submitting states if they could allow us a little bit of flexibility on the time to make sure that we do this information session, of course, before the General Assembly, but we may find it difficult to do by the first quarter.
Okay, thank you, Secretary. Any other reactions from proposals? Yeah, I recognize the Ambassador of Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the proposal of the Secretariat, that will be about 4 weeks before the General Assembly, is acceptable to my delegation.
Okay, thank you, Philippines. Some adjustment of timing of information meeting, at least 4 weeks before next session of General Assembly. Are there any comments? Austria.
Thank you. This is just to align our delegation with the proposal by the Philippines, Algeria, and Hungary. We think it is an excellent idea to have an information meeting in order to make the most people familiar with this new draft framework, and which is very important, and also for its implication that the people identify with it and they get to know it before the General Assembly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Austria, also seconded by Austria, and now I give the floor to Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise, we also want to support the amendment made by Philippines, Algeria, Hungary, and add Turkey, please. Thank you.
I recognize the delegation of Mongolia.
Thank you, Chair. We also support to convene the meeting before the General Assembly. It's of course we need to give some time framework for the Secretariat to work on it. So it would be better to convene the review before the General Assembly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mongolia. I think wide support from our committee members. So can I take it the committee will adopt the new para 5 as amended? Are there any objections? I see none. So new para 5 was adopted as amended. Para 6, to recommend to GA to approve the overall research framework. Any objections? Seeing none, is adopted. Para 7, to request the Secretariat to continue elaborating guidance notes and other informational materials. I recognize Turkey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, we have actually a question to the Secretary and also to the colleagues from the committee. Well, starting from 6 onwards, we think that there is an inconsistency with the paragraph that we have adopted just now in 5. In paragraph 5, we're saying that we're recommending to the General Assembly to approve the overall results framework. So it means that as the committee, we have not yet approved. We don't have that authority. So the authority belongs to the General Assembly, right? So, and when I look at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, do you think, as the committee, can we request such steps before approving overall results framework? Is it appropriate? Or should it be the General Assembly, maybe, to request such steps? That's my question. I think it would be better if we delete those paragraphs and ask the General Assembly to consider that, because otherwise we're going way over and prejudging the outcome of the General Assembly's recommendations. Huh? Thank you.
Yeah, it's quite relevant, and I think the Secretariat fully agrees with your point raised by your Turkish delegation. So I'd like to invite the Secretariat to respond.
Indeed, but before I respond, we did receive a written draft amendment to paragraph 7 as well, so we need to acknowledge that from Colombia. However, I think the point of Turkey is correct, and we didn't, because it's already been through an intergovernmental process. And if we start touching that intergovernmental process of 53 countries by this committee and then sending it back to the full General Assembly, there's a problem in procedure there in that sense. So we endorse Turkey's proposal. Thank you. However, we had a written, in order, because we had a mistake, we forgot to put up the written amendment to paragraph 7, which was submitted previously through ICH amendments by Colombia. So I just want to put that there because we made a mistake and we didn't have it on the file. Of course, that means should Turkey's proposal be done, then of course that amendment goes. Thank you.
Okay, it's Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to call the attention that we also mentioned when we had an intervention that we want to point on the goal 11 because we've seen during the committee you've been working on the goal number 4 of the Agenda 2030 and somehow the overall agenda, but and we know in the division of creativity you're working on the goal 11 for the different conventions, but we want to insist that it's important to remark that ICH has also to deal with this goal 11. So we would like to include it in this amendment. Thank you.
Okay. Again, Turkey has suggested we should remove the entire paragraph, the 2 paragraphs 7 and 8, because actually it was not included in Chengdu. So if we add it here in a smaller group, what was included was reference to reporting mechanisms outside of the conventions, in particular the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030. That was agreed in Chengdu, and indeed we hadn't put it here. But Goal 11 was not agreed in Chengdu. So if the committee now comes and adds to what was agreed by a larger number of member states, and then it goes to the General Assembly, there's a problem in procedure. So I think Turkey is right. It's actually not the committee's mandate to request at this stage, because it is for the General Assembly to approve, and therefore it is for the General Assembly to request this work of the Secretariat. And as you rightly mentioned, again, this is being addressed in the C5 of UNESCO. So we're dealing with an overall results framework. Your concern is addressed in the C5. It could go into. So it's just, it's not that we won't do it, but it is addressed in the C5. Thank you. Turkey wishes the floor.
Now it's time for Turkey to react.
Thank you very much. Let me thank the Secretariat for this explanation and endorsement of what we have proposed. But we have actually proposed to delete the rest, not only 7 and 8, because they are all interlinked. And I mean, for example, requesting the Secretariat to revise the form accordingly. The form, ICH 10, will be a periodic reporting form which will be revised according to the overall results framework. So these are all interlinked and they are all related to the adopted version of the overall results framework. That's why it should be the General Assembly who requests these steps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. And Colombia, and followed by Philippines. First, Colombia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, if it's about a procedure, for us it's okay to delete the paragraph. It's okay. We only matter that this subject is work within this overall framework for the convention, but it's okay.
Thank you, Colombia. Now, Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. We thank Turkey for the suggestion. We concur that the remaining paragraphs would be superfluous at this stage since the General Assembly needs to make the final decision. But we do take into account Colombia's useful suggestion. I think we should note it, of course, in the records and for future implementation of this topic. But also to say that the committee has a role also in determining the overall results framework, and our discussions here should feed into the discussions at the General Assembly. And if any amendments need to be done to the overall results framework, actually, they should be taken because the committee probably is based on its mandate, is a higher body than the working group. And also we have to report to the General Assembly. So we shouldn't tie the hands also of the committee nor the General Assembly to amend, if necessary, the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philippines. Now, Secretariat.
Indeed, we take note, and in any case, the report of the committee needs to go to the General Assembly, and we will make sure that the discussions are fully reflected in the report that goes to the General Assembly.
So, Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Nous n'avons pas de commentaires. Nous sommes au contraire, nous sommes pour la suppression de ces paragraphes-là. Et vous pourrez peut-être dans votre rapport, justement, faire mention des attentes de la Colombie à ce sujet. J'avais juste une remarque sur le paragraphe 11. Je ne crois pas que le paragraphe 11 soit inclus dans la volonté de suppression. Paragraphe 11, je crois qu'il devrait rester parce que nous ne faisons qu'inviter les États parties à verser des contributions volontaires supplémentaires au Fonds du patrimoine. Je pose la question peut-être à la Turquie et aux Philippines, mais je ne pense pas qu'on ait demandé à ce que le paragraphe 11 soit supprimé. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Yeah, before giving the floor to Turkey, if I'm not mistaken, we added a new para 5, and para 5, original 5, becomes para 6. And 7, 8, 9, 10 will be deleted. And upon the proposal by Algeria, the 11, all the para 11 will become para 7. And having said that, I now give the floor to Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I think this is not general capacity building activity. It's specifically related to the implementation of the overall results framework. We are not mentioning in a wider framework. So in that regard, I think it should also be deleted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Turkey. And Mr. Curtis?
Yeah, indeed. I think the way it's formulated is indeed a paragraph, the new paragraph 11 is directly related to paragraph 10. And although we are usually inviting countries to support, in this sense it wouldn't make sense to keep paragraph 11 because paragraph 11 is asking to contribute for the purpose of paragraph 10. So perhaps this needs to be reproduced in a draft decision for the General Assembly. Thank you.
Okay, I now give the floor to Hungary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Indeed, this debate is very fruitful and is already coming, I think, towards the end. We would like to express support for the suggestion made by Turkey and supported by a number of delegations not to rush forward and preempt the decision that the General Assembly may take. Maybe we are saying the obvious, but then perhaps a small phrase after para 5, in para 5, could be included in the sense that this committee recommends to the General Assembly to expedite steps towards the implementation of this overall results framework. So what we are saying now in 6 to 9 and even 10 could be in a brief form put there as a suggestion for the General Assembly that not only it adopts the overall results framework, but also makes the necessary steps for its implementation in terms of elaborating guidance notes, etc. Or is this something that would go inevitably into the General Assembly draft recommendation? I'm not sure there, but I would like this overall results framework to be put in place after its adoption by the General Assembly, possible adoption by the General Assembly, as soon as possible. And I would also like to inquire from the Secretary as for the timeline, whether there will still be sufficient time for this to go into the first cycle of periodic reporting that we will envisage later today as regional national reporting, whether there will be enough time after the General Assembly to instrumentalize the tools that are necessary for the pair rep to go along this conceptual framework. And as a last remark, let me also express our support for what Philippines have said concerning the role of this committee. We see the role of this committee as sovereign with regard to the expert group that came together in Chengdu and did this formidable work for which we have expressed great support. But I don't think that the numbers is something that plays here. The fact that there have been 53 member states present and here there are 24, this is not something that decides on who has authority over the other. This committee has been elected by the General Assembly, and while we very much appreciate the work of the working group in Chengdu, this committee has the mandate to approve the results that have been magnificently achieved there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Hungary. And later I will ask, can you elaborate your proposal in written or little specific language? And now I give the floor to Secretariat.
Thank you. I understand two questions that Hungary proposed to the Secretariat. The first concerns, will things be ready in time in terms of periodic reporting? And I will invite you, we address this in the next document on the change of the operational directives precisely for the reporting cycle, which is why we are proposing an some 18-month suspension of periodic reporting. We need time. But as Ambassador Wang informed us, we need to be very careful about time as well. So we propose, we need about 18 months, we estimate. We need about 18 months to, first of all, once it's approved, and we're not starting until it's approved because we can't start until it's approved. Once it's approved, we then start working on the forms and capacity building materials simultaneously. So we estimate about 18 months at least to do that. So there will be 2 committee sessions where no periodic reports will be examined, because we simply we can't do both at the same time. Either we keep examining new periodic reports, or we stop for a while until we can do the work necessary to adjust to the new system. This will be dealt with in the periodic. This is what the draft amendments are to the operational directives. And when we come to that, I will explain that quite quickly. Those also need to be approved by the General Assembly. As to the mandate of the committee to the working group, you are right. The committee has sovereign mandate, but it's not an expert group that met. It was an intergovernmental working group, who are the same governments that sit on the General Assembly. So while it's not a mandate issue, it does make sense to think that they were there as representatives, since in any way the General Assembly has higher authority than the committee on this matter. So that's why I was speaking in that right. You are correct. The committee is mandated over the intergovernmental working group. But it was a formal intergovernmental working group which was requested by the committee. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Secretary, and if there is no specific language text which will be proposed by Hungary, if that's the case, we will get back to original text. Addition of new paragraph 5 and paragraph original 5 becomes 6 and the period there. May I ask the delegation of Algeria, Nassim? Can you comment on this?
Mr. President, I was consulting with my expert. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, we have fully discussed. So with the addition of new para 5 and old para becomes new para 6 and their full period. And you mentioned about that old para 11, you want to keep that para.
We are satisfied by the explanation made by the Secretariat. We are not insisting on keeping para 5. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you so much.
We have a written proposal from Hungary for paragraph 6. Just to
Okay. Yeah, let's wait for a while because the delegation of Hungary just proposed some new language. Okay, the delegation of Hungary added at the last part of that para 6 recommends to the General Assembly to approve the overall research framework as annexed to this decision and to initiate steps for its implementation. Are there any comments? I see none. So para 6 is adopted as amended.
Chapeau. Do we have a chapeau or not? As a whole.
Yeah, we have now adopted each of the para, and we need to adopt the decisions as a whole, from para 1 to para 6 as amended. Seeing no objections, I declare decision 12.9 adopted as amended.